everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. I firstly want to say I'm sorry if my hair looks like a mess. I was out for a walk, and when I got like halfway through, it went from sunny to windy and raining, and also like little bits of ice in there, and it was not a good time. I did not have anything to cover my head, and I've tried to like restyle it a little bit, but I just wanted to get that out there because I don't want people to like get distracted by my hair over the message of this video, because this is actually a pretty interesting subject. I feel like this is going to be something that's like either 8 minutes or 20 minutes, and I haven't really figured out which way it's going to go at this point. And this is going to be based around the question, am I a sex worker / is what I do sex work? And the reason why this came up is recently on Twitter, I posted a link to a video that Milkwebs made, which is like intro to sex work, because I thought it was a really good video, and I thought it had a lot of interesting things to say about sex work, especially for somebody who is thinking about getting into it, or is curious about it, or doesn't really actually know that much about how the world of sex work works. And in the comments of that post, somebody asked me, hey Evie, do you consider what you do to be sex work? Are you a sex worker? And this is something I've gotten off and on over the course of the time I've been on YouTube. Even before I had a YouTube channel, when I was just on Instagram, I had this come up. And I think it's a really interesting question, mostly because it also allows me to talk a little bit about sex work in general on my channel, and I think it's important to talk about because there are so many intersections with that when it comes to the world of BDSM, and I'm not really otherwise sure how to address it, so we're going to be talking about it today. And I think in order to have this conversation, we kind of first need to establish what sex work even is. And I found this really interesting article, and I want to read some snippets of it for you guys now to give you all some context, and then I will put a link down in the description box below to the actual full article if you want to read it. And this is from hopesandfears.com, and this is called What Constitutes Sex Work? And it is just some answers from people of all sorts of different types of sex work backgrounds. And the first one is from somebody named Katie. And they say, the first thing you have to keep in mind is that sex work and sex worker are political terms. It's an umbrella term to create alliances between marginalized groups of workers. The term sex work was coined in the early 1970s by sex worker activist Carol Leigh, aka Scarlet Harlot, to counter derogatory terms used by whorephobic second-wave feminism. Cam girls are sex workers. Phone sex operators are sex workers. Online workers are sex workers. The two pillars of the definition of sex work are stigmatization and criminalization. For the most part, with few exceptions, what we're talking about is someone who trades sex or sexualized services to a client of some sort. Even porn workers do, to some extent, because even though it's indirect, they are selling videos of themselves to people. Where I draw the line, and this is controversial territory, is with people who have recently attempted to appropriate the term, like erotica writers and burlesque performers. A lot of older sex workers' rights activists who are not sex workers themselves anymore have lost touch with the living definition of sex work, but most contemporary activists I know would agree. The stigma isn't there, and certainly the criminalization isn't there. I'm glad these folks feel sex work is a positive enough label to want to apply it to themselves, but they'd be more effective utilizing their privilege for us as allies rather than muddying the waters with appropriation. Now, there are a few other people who also contributed their thoughts to this. So one that was a lot quicker of an answer was from Cricket, who was a bikini dancer and also a former dominatrix. And they said that I believe sex work is when you have a job that stimulates sexual thoughts in a person mentally or physically. Some sex work is mental, like dancing at a strip club, posing for Playboy, or writing dirty stories. Other sex work is physical, like being a porn star or prostitute. And then finally, the last person I'm going to read from is from Erin Johnson, who was a nude model and an actress. And Erin says that it depends on the intent. Just because someone is attracted to somebody else's naked body in a photograph that, let's say, was an artistic nude, doesn't mean that the photo was intended to create or fulfill a sexual fantasy. It was intended to show the human body in its natural form, create a mood, etc. I personally don't always correlate nudity with sex. For me, this means that it doesn't fall under the category of sex work. And so just there are a lot of different ways of thinking about sex work. And the definition I think that I agree with the most is that sex work is a transaction with the intent of stimulating somebody sexually or physically. That could mean that sex work includes obviously full service sex workers, that could include strippers, that could include cam models, that could include phone sex operators, that could include people that sell their underwear or their used socks online, that could be people who sell pictures of their feet, that could be fetish models. There's a lot of different types of people that could potentially fall under the category of sex work. Even pro-doms can fall under the category of sex work, although not all pro-doms agree with that, and some pro-doms are really not fond of being called sex workers. I mean, that was kind of a thing that came up in bonding and Netflix. But anyways, let's not talk about bonding right now. Let's talk about sex workers. And I think that I also really agree with sort of the premise of the first person, which is the appropriation of the term sex worker. I personally don't consider what I do to be sex work. Boom, there's the whole crux of this video. You have your answer. You can click away now. But seriously, I want to explain why I don't consider my work to be sex work. And then if you disagree with me, maybe listen to my argument and then maybe it'll make more sense. So the reason why I don't think that what I do is sex work is because it doesn't have the intention behind it. Nothing I do is intended to stimulate people physically, mentally, etc. I am first and foremost an educator. My intent is to talk to people about how to do BDSM. It is not to stimulate anybody or make anybody develop erotic feelings for me or anything like that. It's purely about, okay, you want to learn more about the thing? I want to help you learn more about the thing. Here we go. We make videos, we do photo shoots, we do things that demonstrate BDSM in a variety of different ways in order to accomplish that particular goal. Now, this isn't to say that people don't necessarily take my work in a sexual way, but that is just sort of being a person on the internet who posts photos and videos of themselves. Like, it doesn't matter what I wear or what I dress like, how I talk. It doesn't matter what I do. There will always be people who look at my videos, who look at my photos, and bring themselves pleasure over that. But because there was an intention on my end for that to happen, I think that's a very different situation from somebody like making photos or videos or porn of themselves in order to have that transaction there where somebody is going to purposefully use that as a way to sexually stimulate themselves. And also the transaction part isn't really there either. Like, my YouTube videos are all free and my live streams are all free. The only thing that has a paywall behind it is Patreon. And I think that is maybe the part where people get the most confused. I think there's like a couple of things that people could get confused about, but let's just talk about the Patreon thing. So I think some people might assume that my Patreon is like a sexual thing and then that is what makes it sex work. Now, regardless of the fact you can't actually use Patreon in order to fund things like that, you can't use Patreon. It's against their terms of service to use it to make pornographic material. So that kind of solves that one right there. But I don't use it for that. Everything that I do has the intent of education and demonstration and example. I do have photo shoots, I do have videos that involve some degree of nudity to them because I can't show that on YouTube, but if you are at all familiar with the BDSM world, you understand that to some degree, nudity is kind of necessary for different types of play. Like if I do a fireplace scene and I'm still fully clothed, that's probably not gonna end well. So there are some elements where, like, yeah, there's nudity, there's nipples, there's other things going on. And I think, again, the intention is different there. And I think there is a big difference between me doing a photo shoot that's like educationally demonstrating how do you do a self-wax play scene versus like having a whole porn setup where the focus isn't necessarily instructionally how do you do wax play, but performing it in a way that is intended to be erotically stimulating in some capacity. So for anybody who is wondering, my Patreon is not a pornographic paradise. It is not a way to get access to me in order to do sex work behaviors. I have had people who have approached me for that in the past. Like, they think if they join my Patreon that I will like send them private nudes, that I will do like custom videos for them, and not in a, oh, hey, can you help me with this like BDSM problem I'm having? They're like, hey, can you like make a video for me in like full latex, and then can you like crush a bug while you do it, and I'll pay you like $1,000. That exact situation has not come up, and even if it did, I wouldn't do it. But just to give some examples of like the kinds of things I've gotten where people get confused about where the boundaries are for me personally. And then in general on my social media, I don't consider what I do to be sex work there either. Like outside of YouTube, like on Twitter, it's pretty much all just like text stuff. If I do post anything that's media related, it's previews of things for Patreon so people can see like what kinds of things I've been doing. And then on Instagram, I basically just don't post anymore. Like, I still follow people on there, and that's mostly what I use it for at this point. But like, I never know what's gonna get my account deleted, so I can't even really like approach anything remotely related to sex work on Instagram, even if I wanted to, because my account would just get like terminated immediately. And the reason I think it would be incorrect to call my content sex work is I think it misunderstands the role of education in sex and like what sort of capacity that needs to be in. Like, I see my content as somewhat similar to like when you're in high school and you have the nursing assistant that comes to your health class and like teaches you how to put on a condom and like that kind of thing, you know? Like, you wouldn't call them a sex worker just because they're like talking about sex, right? And I don't consider myself a sex worker just because I've like made videos on like using the NuvaRing or how to give a blowjob. Like, that seems like a pretty big misunderstanding of what it really means to be a sex worker. And I think it's just important to be able to make that distinction, because it's not that like being a sex worker is bad or wrong, and I should probably make that really clear. Like, I love sex workers. Sex workers are doing God's work. They are on their hustle, on their grind. I support them 110%. I am always here to listen to sex workers about what they need to improve their jobs, their safety, their lives. 100%. It doesn't matter what kind of sex worker you are. If you're selling pictures of your feet, if you're full service, I am here to support you. This is a red umbrella channel. In case it wasn't obvious, I'm very, very pro sex worker. But for me in my work, it's inaccurate to call me a sex worker, which is not to say that I would never consider doing sex work or that any kind of sex work is potentially off limits for me. It's just like not something I'm really considering at this point in my life. Like, I've thought about it before. I've thought about different avenues that I might try to do that with, and like none of them really sound appealing, and frankly they seem like really exhausting for me and my personality, so I've never really gone down that route before. But sex work is awesome. It's not that I'm anti-sex work. It's just inaccurate to describe me and my content that way. And I think another reason for this confusion is because of the stigma that seems to be attached to sex and BDSM in general. Like, I know when people in my life have found out that I am kinky, that I talk about BDSM online, there is this knee-jerk assumption that like, oh my god, she's selling her body on the internet, and it's like, that's not what this is at all. Even if it was, I wouldn't really consider it a problem, but it's not. Factually, that's just incorrect. And there seems to be this assumption that anything that has to do with talking about BDSM online must be so perverted and so sexual and so overt and raunchy that it has to be in that same umbrella, because all of those negative things are like associated with sex work. And it's like, I am having trouble like fully explaining it, because I have to try and go into somebody else's way of thinking about it that's not my own, to try and understand why they're even attempting to make that connection, because that is just such a foreign thing to me that doesn't work with my brain. But that is something I've observed, is just that like people hear oh, you do BDSM stuff online, that means that she's doing porn. That means that she's a cam girl. That means she's this, that, that. And none of that is true. None of that is true. And I think it also speaks to like how much people assume like BDSM and sex are connected, even when that's not necessarily the case. And I just don't even really know how to explain it other than it's not always sexual. And the proof I have to demonstrate that is that I am an asexual person who does BDSM. And there are other YouTubers like Morgan Thorne who are also asexual that also do BDSM. So it doesn't necessarily make sense to like leap to this conclusion that BDSM is a sex thing. And because it's a sex thing and because it's online and because I'm talking about it, it's therefore also sex work. And that's basically the story of why I call myself a BDSM educator and not a sex worker. I'm not presently a sex worker. I don't have plans of becoming a sex worker. That doesn't mean that I'm never open to that possibility or that it will never happen in my life, because I support sex workers. I think that they are just as valid as anybody else's career choices, and I think we should support them more. So I'm not a sex worker. Again, I just want to emphasize that. Not a sex worker. This channel is not about sex work. If you are confused about that for some reason, I'm happy to explain it more. You can leave a comment down in the comment section below. I'm hoping that something in here like made sense. This is kind of another one of those like rambly talky videos where I haven't really planned anything in particular out because this literally happened a couple hours ago, and so I haven't really had time to like sit down and really formulate something, although this is, I think, a simple enough topic to where it doesn't really need it, because the short answer is just I'm not a sex worker because I don't consider myself to be a sex worker, but I feel like it is worth kind of that additional explanation that I gave. So hopefully you found this interesting and helpful. If you have any other like thoughts or concerns or questions, if you like still think I'm a sex worker for some reason, I would love to know why you think that down in the comment section below. I don't think talking about sex is what makes somebody a sex worker, because that would misclassify like every like professional like public health person and sexologist and erotica writer and everyone else as a sex worker, and I don't think that that is really what the term sex worker means, for reasons I stated at the beginning of this video and reasons that are presented in the article that I'm going to have linked down in the description box below. But anyways, I will shut myself up right there because this has gone on for far too long. If you like this video, if you want to see more from me, please do subscribe. I make videos twice a week about all sorts of BDSM and kink related topics. If you really enjoyed this, if you want to support my channel, the best way you can do that is through Patreon. I have Bandit here, who is my little Pomeranian, who would really love it if you supported me on Patreon. So please go and check that out if you want to make her day nice and happy. But anyways, that is everything. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all again very soon. Bye!